Rex Brown, a name most fans skim past when talking about Pantera, yet behind it lies one of the most silent and painful stories in heavy metal. A Texas boy who lost his father at the age of 7, he grew up in a house filled with silence and found his only salvation in the low, husky tones of the bass, a sound that echoed his own sorrow. He never sought fame, but fate pushed him into the heart of one of the most ferocious bands in history, forcing him to witness it all: the glory, the addiction, the betrayal, and the death that stole his dearest brother right on stage. He nearly died from alcohol, survived life-threatening surgery, and spent years misunderstood as the outsider. But in truth, Rex was the only one who walked the entire journey. From the dusty garages of Texas to the massive arenas where tens of thousands screamed his name. And when the lights finally went out, when other legends fell one by one, he was still there, alone, with his bass and a heart full of scars. But did you know that his silence might just be the loudest scream heavy metal has ever heard? Rex Brown was born on July 27, 1964, in Graham, Texas, a small town nestled in the southern plains of America, where the sky was so blue it seemed there could never be room for darkness. On those sweltering afternoons, the wind carried the scent of dry earth and the lazy hum of rural life. Everything appeared perfectly peaceful until fate came knocking far too soon. When Rex was just 7, his father, the man he admired above all, died after a long illness. The death came quietly, as if the whole world had bowed its head in silence. No music, no tears, only the sound of the wind brushing against the wooden door and a little boy standing frozen beside a piano that had yet to play its first note. From that moment, the emptiness in Rex's heart became a crack that would never fully heal. His mother became the pillar of the family, working day and night to hold their home together, while his grandmother, an elderly woman filled with musical memories, was the first to gently place the language of music into his hands. She taught him classical piano, introducing him to the world of ragtime and Scott Joplin, music rich in rhythm yet steeped in sorrow. In every melody, the boy sensed something achingly familiar: loneliness, loss, and a quiet kind of comfort. Music wasn't just entertainment. It was the only way Rex knew how to survive in a world that had taken his father away. At 12, Rex stumbled upon a bass guitar in his school's music room, and in that instant, he knew he had found his true voice. The bass was deep, thick, and hidden within the chaos. It made him feel seen without ever needing to step into the spotlight. It wasn't the instrument of those who craved attention. It was the instrument of those who carried the weight of the song on their shoulders. And somehow, Rex naturally became that person. He grew up disciplined and grounded, quiet but resilient. Outside of music, Rex was an exemplary student and earned the rank of Eagle Scout, a symbol of endurance and responsibility. He played in his high school jazz band, quickly standing out for his rhythmic intuition and his ability to read musical structure. He was even offered a scholarship to study jazz at the University of North Texas, a dream coveted by hundreds of young musicians. But Rex turned it down, not out of arrogance, but because he knew deep down that he wasn't born to sit in a classroom. "The kind of music I was looking for wasn't in any textbook," he would later say. "It lived in the smoke, in the screams, in the offbeats that made no sense, but were real as hell." While his friends dreamed of lecture halls, Rex dreamed of stages, where music wasn't theory, but blood, breath, and soul. That childhood, marked by the loss of his father, the nights spent beside his grandmother listening to piano notes fall like rain, and the discipline of his youth, quietly forged the man Rex Brown would become, calm, steadfast, and brutally honest with his music. No one could have guessed that the shy boy who once sought comfort in piano keys would soon step into a completely different world, one where sound no longer soothed, but fought to survive. And there, in the storm of heavy metal, that same boy would become the man who kept the heartbeat of the chaos alive. In 1982, Rex Brown officially joined Pantera, a high school band founded by brothers Dimebag Darrell and Vinnie Paul. At that time, Pantera was just a local group playing glam metal in the style of Mötley Crüe and Van Halen. Tight leather pants, teased hair sprayed sky high, flashy riffs, and catchy melodies. But hidden beneath the noisy bar gigs of Texas, Rex sensed something different, a raw, unpolished energy waiting to erupt. Though he wasn't the center of attention, he quickly became the balancing force between two opposing poles, Dimebag's wild fire and Vinnie Paul's iron discipline. Rex's bass lines were never showy, but they built the rhythmic skeleton of the entire sound. That heavy, thick groove that gradually helped Pantera shed its imitation phase and carve out its own identity. Dimebag's chaotic riffs only gained their crushing power when anchored by Rex's deep, solid, and surgically precise bass. By 1987, with the arrival of Phil Anselmo, Pantera underwent a total transformation. They cut their hair, ditched the makeup, and abandoned their glam metal image to forge something new, groove metal, raw, aggressive, but tightly controlled. The fusion of Dimebag's ferocity, Phil's savage vocals, and Rex's grounded bass created a seismic shift in the metal world. From then on, Pantera began stepping out of small bars and onto real stages, where every drum hit and every string pluck carried the weight of rebellion. Yet behind those blazing sounds, a silent tragedy had already begun to take shape, one that would not only change the band's fate, but also alter Rex Brown's life forever. In 1990, after nearly a decade of grinding in the shadows, Pantera released Cowboys from Hell, a historic turning point. The glam metal sheen was gone. In its place stood something brutal, pure, and undeniably real, forcing the entire metal scene to take notice. In tracks like Domination and Cemetery Gates, Rex Brown's bass flowed like an underground current, never in the spotlight, yet essential in keeping the music from splintering into chaos. While Dimebag's guitar screamed and Phil Anselmo set fire to every lyric, Rex held the line, forming the axis that allowed all that raw energy to explode in sync. It was the album that redefined the power of metal in the 1990s. 2 years later came Vulgar Display of Power, 1992, and Walk became the anthem of an entire generation. The slow, heavy, looping bass riff hit like a hammer to the chest, a rhythm so primal and crushing it made crowds instinctively nod their heads in unison. Rex was the one keeping that pulse steady, preventing it from being swallowed by the storm of guitars and drums. Walk wasn't just a song. It was a declaration, the blueprint of groove metal that hundreds of bands would later try to replicate. Yet none could recreate its weight, its deliberate pace, and the way it made your heartbeat stumble. By 1994, Far Beyond Driven catapulted Pantera to the top, debuting at #1 on the Billboard 200, an unprecedented feat for an extreme metal album. In every track, especially 5 Minutes Alone and I'm Broken, Rex's bass reached full maturity, both technically and emotionally. He was no longer just keeping time. He was conversing with Dimebag, weaving his notes into a seamless emotional current that made Pantera's sound not just heavy, but profoundly human. It was the era when Rex wasn't merely the bassist. He was the heartbeat of the Pantera machine, a machine running at full speed, unstoppable. But every peak comes with a price. And as the lights burned their brightest, the first cracks began to appear. Not on stage, but within the very people who had built the legend. From 1996 to 2000, Pantera slowly entered a period of fracture, a silent but fierce crisis that began from within the hearts of four men who had once been as close as brothers. The Great Southern Trendkill, 1996, was the clearest sign of it, a heavy, suffocating, and dark album that almost foretold their downfall. Phil Anselmo recorded his vocals separately from the rest of the band, working in New Orleans, while Dimebag, Vinnie, and Rex stayed behind in Texas. While Dimebag's guitar screamed like a blade and Vinnie's drums hit like sledgehammers, Rex's bass was deep, subdued, and full of restraint. It didn't just hold the rhythm of the music, it held together a band that was already losing its direction. At that time, Phil was sinking deep into addiction. His dependency drove him away from everyone, sometimes even disappearing before tours. Dimebag and Vinnie were devastated, unable to recognize the man who had once been the soul of Pantera. And Rex, true to his lifelong role, stood in the middle, the mediator, the listener, the one who endured. He didn't just play bass, he held the band together with his calm. When no one else could talk to Phil, Rex still tried to reach him. When Dime and Vinnie were ready to give up, Rex was the one who convinced them to keep going. By 2000, Reinventing the Steel was released, the final attempt to mend what was broken. The album exploded with energy, a fierce return to the roots of metal, but behind the scenes, everything had already snapped. Phil was distant, Dime and Vinnie were exhausted, and Rex, the least talked about member, remained the quiet pillar. He didn't shine, didn't speak, but without him, Pantera would have collapsed right there in the studio. Amid all the chaos, Rex kept the rhythm. Not out of ambition, but because he didn't know how to do anything else except fight to keep the music alive. And when that last album ended, none of them realized what remained afterward wouldn't just be a breakup, but a tragedy that would make return impossible. By the late 1990s, the cracks in Pantera finally shattered. Years of tension between Phil, Dimebag, and Vinnie erupted into real conflict. Tours were canceled one after another, rehearsals became rare, and when they did gather, they were no longer four friends making music, but four weary souls tolerating each other out of duty. Phil Anselmo was drowning in addiction, increasingly detached from reality. Dimebag still carried the flame of creativity, but disappointment had begun to cloud his eyes. Vinnie hid his pain behind a cold front. And Rex Brown, once the foundation, became the last fragile bridge between them, even as he himself was running out of strength. Each time he stepped on stage, Rex played as if Pantera was still whole. But he knew, after every song, they drifted further apart. It felt like watching a family fall apart in slow motion, powerless to stop it. The friendship, passion, and loyalty that had bound them for 2 decades now existed only as memories. By 2003, Pantera was officially over. No press conference, no announcement, no public tears, just a heavy silence that lasted forever. For Rex Brown, it wasn't just the end of a band, but the collapse of a family he had spent his entire youth trying to protect. When the final lights went out, he stood alone on an empty stage, unable to believe it was really over. But the cruelest blow was yet to come. Because soon, a bullet would take away his closest friend and the last piece of his soul that music had not yet healed. In 2004, tragedy struck like lightning from a clear sky. Dimebag Darrell, his dearest brother, the man who had shared every stage, every drink, every dream, was shot and killed on stage while performing with his new band, Damage Plan. The news spread instantly, leaving the rock world in shock, and Rex Brown nearly collapsed. He didn't attend the funeral, not out of coldness, but because he couldn't bear it. "I couldn't see him like that. I want to remember Dime smiling," Rex later said. A sentence that made everyone understand. Losing Dime meant losing half of his soul. After that day, Rex sank into darkness. He stopped performing, spoke little, and started drinking. Not to forget, but to momentarily stop remembering. Alcohol became his only companion, dragging him into depression and isolation. From a man who had once been the band's pillar, he became a shadow of himself. On drunken nights, he would listen to Cemetery Gates and cry, not for the song, but for the friend who was no longer there to play it with him. Then, in 2009, his body finally gave out. Rex was rushed to the hospital in critical condition from acute pancreatitis caused by alcohol abuse. Doctors removed his gallbladder and polyps and warned him he might not survive. It was the moment he had to face himself. No music, no band, no brothers, just a man lying between life and death, wondering if anything remained of his life besides scars. And yet, when everyone thought Rex Brown would retire, disappear, or fade away like so many broken musicians before him, he came back, quietly but steadfastly. No loud declarations, no justifications, no pity-seeking. He walked out of the hospital like a man who had survived a war. Thinner, quieter, but with clearer eyes than ever before. Inside him, there were no more dreams of fame, only gratitude for being alive and still able to play. And for Rex, that was enough to start over. After everything, when Pantera had become nothing but a blood-stained, tear-soaked memory, Rex Brown returned to music the way a soldier returns to the battlefield. Not for victory, but because a part of his soul was still buried there, unfinished. In 2001, he joined Down, the band led by Phil Anselmo, the very man whose actions had helped destroy Pantera. It wasn't an easy reunion. It was a test of forgiveness and faith. The relationship between Rex and Phil was more complex than any song they had ever played. Between them lay tons of memories, alcohol, stages, long tours, and unspoken words left hanging since Pantera. But Rex agreed to come back, not out of friendship, but for music. Down wasn't about screaming or glory. It was a place where broken men tried to make peace with themselves. When Rex recorded Down 2, A Bustle in Your Hedgerow, 2002, his music had changed, deeper, slower, filled with more pauses and silences. In songs like Ghosts Along the Mississippi and Where I'm Going, his bass sounded like a confession, a blend of melancholy and serenity, as if every note was a step toward healing. Gone were the sharp edges of Pantera. Gone was the tension. Only a group of wounded souls trying to survive, one riff at a time. By Down 3, Over the Under, 2007, Rex had become the quiet soul of the band. The album was written at a time when the entire metal world was mourning Dimebag Darrell, and for Rex, it was more than a record. It was a farewell ritual. In tracks like I Scream, On March the Saints, and Oh, I Never Try, his bass carried a different kind of weight, not anger, but wisdom, calmness, and pain transformed into strength. That was the moment Rex stopped running from grief. He allowed it to stay, to become sound. Down never reached the commercial heights of Pantera, but for Rex, this was his period of rebirth, both musically and spiritually. He learned to play for himself, not to hold the rhythm for others. Surrounded by Phil Anselmo, the man who had once hurt him, and new bandmates, Rex chose silence, patience, and forgiveness. Because to him, only then could music become a safe haven again. By 2011, when Down went on hiatus, Rex left the band, but this time, not in anger. He walked away with a heart that had finally healed. After a decade in the shadows, he knew it was time to write a chapter under his own name. He no longer wanted to stand behind others or hold their rhythm. It was time to create his own melody. That's how Kill Devil Hill was born, a band he co-founded with legendary drummer Vinnie Paul of Black Sabbath and Dio. For Rex, this wasn't just a new project, but a resurrection. After years of loss, pain, and silence. For the first time in his career, he wasn't the foundation, he was the driver. In Kill Devil Hill, Rex took charge, composing, arranging, and shaping the sound. He wanted to prove that he wasn't just part of a glorious past called Pantera, but an artist in his own right, with his own voice and identity. The combination of Rex's bass and Vinnie's powerful drumming created a sound that was both classic and modern, a fusion of 70s metal spirit and the weight of a new century. Their debut album, Kill Devil Hill, 2012, was a surprising explosion. Rex's bass no longer hid in the background, it surged forward, thick, groovy, commanding. Critics called it the reincarnation of Pantera's soul in a new form. The second album, Revolution Rise, 2013, dug even deeper emotionally, with introspective lyrics and sharper arrangements. Here, Rex wasn't talking about the past. He was talking about survival, the wounds, the falls, and the act of standing again with the same trembling hands that once held his bass after surgery. Kill Devil Hill never reached Pantera's legendary status, but that wasn't what Rex sought. What mattered to him was freedom, to play, to sing, to own his sound. And in every note, listeners could feel it. He was no longer a man clinging to a dead band, but a survivor building a smaller, quieter, yet purer legacy of his own. That journey eventually came to an end. Not from failure, but from understanding. Rex realized that some chapters aren't meant to last long. They only need to be deep enough to remind him that he could always begin again, even from the ashes. In 2017, after years of silence, Rex Brown finally stepped into the light under his own name. He released his first solo album, Smoke on This. An extraordinary milestone because for the first time in over 3 decades, Rex not only played bass, but also sang lead vocals, played guitar, and wrote the lyrics himself. This wasn't just an album. It was a personal declaration from a man who had lived through loss, addiction, the deaths of friends, and now only wanted to live honestly. The music in Smoke on This carried the spirit of the American South, heavy, earthy, and unhurried, like a Texas sunset. There were no screams, no frantic tempos, only thick, soulful rock filled with truth. Songs like Crossing Lines, Buried Alive, and Lone Rider felt like late-written diary pages, full of sorrow, regret, and above all, the freedom he had always longed for but never found in Pantera. Rex's voice was rough, gravelly, and imperfect. But it was that imperfection that made his music feel human and deeply real. Though the album didn't achieve commercial success, critics hailed it as the most honest work of Rex Brown's career. It was an album that didn't try to please anyone, didn't chase trends. It simply let a man speak his truth. Since then, Rex has maintained a steady creative rhythm, appearing selectively in collaborations and metal tribute albums, often lending his bass to old friends and young bands inspired by Pantera. He no longer chases fame or crowds. For Rex, a quiet night, a bass guitar, and a few steady chords are enough. After years of living amid noise and chaos, he has finally reclaimed the one thing music was always meant to give him, peace. And from there, Rex's life entered a new chapter. Fewer lights, less noise, but fuller than ever before. In the years that followed, Rex Brown chose a quiet life, far away from the noise of show business. He didn't boast, didn't seek the spotlight, and never used social media to build a glamorous image. His private life remained almost completely closed off, revealed only briefly through the pages of his memoir, Official Truth, 101 Proof, where he mentioned his ex-wife, Belinda. That marriage ended in silence. No scandal, no public bitterness, just two people who had walked a long road together and then gently parted ways. They had twins, a boy and a girl, the one true pride of Rex's life, though he rarely spoke about them. His son loved sports, while his daughter showed a natural passion for songwriting, as if she had inherited her father's spirit. When asked about his family, Rex only smiled and said, "They have a wonderful mother, and me, I just try not to screw things up." A simple sentence, but one that carried his entire philosophy of life: gratitude, humility, and the constant effort to learn how to be a better father. After years of solitude, Rex unexpectedly reconnected with Elena Henrard, the woman who had once shared his youth. They met again after decades apart, and this time, he didn't let her go. In June 2023, Rex and Elena were married quietly, surrounded only by a few close friends and relatives. No press, no paparazzi, only music, loved ones, and the glow of candlelight. A small wedding, perfectly in line with the way he has always lived. Peaceful, private, and sincere. On his social media bio, only a few words appear: musician, songwriter, father, lover, and all things loud. Enough to describe him fully: an artist, a father, a lover, and a soul forever beating in rhythm with life. Rex believes in God and the Ten Commandments, but doesn't follow any particular religion. He calls it a moral compass, something that helps him stay grounded in a world full of temptations. He doesn't collect luxury items, doesn't flaunt cars or wealth. The only things he's ever sold are a few of his old bass guitars, gifts to his fans, a way of passing on pieces of his history. In rare public appearances, he calls his fans extended family, the people who've walked with him through both the noise and the silence. And indeed, Rex Brown is the kind of person people trust, not because of fame, but because of sincerity. He doesn't need attention or praise. All he needs is a bass, a song, and a quiet sunset. And that's enough. Today, Rex Brown lives between Nashville and Texas, two lands that embody opposing rhythms, yet blend perfectly within him. Nashville is the heart of American music, a place where artists rediscover themselves. Texas is the soil of memory, where he was born, raised, and began everything with an old bass. Now in his 60s, Rex lives by a routine so simple it borders on poetic. Morning coffee, afternoon practice, evening walks around his small ranch with his new wife. He still writes, still performs when inspired, and still connects with fans through short, heartfelt messages. Not about fame, but about what's real: music, family, and peace. After more than half a century in music, Rex Brown remains exactly who he has always been: a bass player who knows when to stay silent, letting the music speak for his heart. No noise, no showmanship, just a life lived fully, humbly, and meaningfully. From 2022 to 2025, Pantera entered a rebirth no one thought possible. In the new lineup with Phil Anselmo, Zakk Wylde, and Charlie Benanti, Rex stands as the only surviving member from the band's golden era. His return wasn't driven by nostalgia or fame, but by loyalty. A devotion to his fallen brothers, Dimebag Darrell and Vinnie Paul. On stage, Rex doesn't try to recreate Pantera as it once was. He keeps the pulse, preserves the spirit, and lets the music that once changed a generation continue to breathe among the crowds. During the M72 tour with Metallica, in cities like Dusseldorf, Brussels, or the special 2025 farewell show Back to the Beginning with Black Sabbath, audiences witnessed something rare, an artist standing in the light without trying to shine. Rex Brown, with his quiet stance and bass in hand, seemed to be holding the rhythm of an entire era, bridging the past and present of metal through his very breath. Beyond performing, Rex has also left his mark in music technology. In 2024, he collaborated with Spectre Bass to create his own signature model, an instrument built precisely to match his feel and style, solid, deep, and honest. In 2025, he partnered with Morley to release the Old Blue Wah pedal, a special pedal that captured the classic tone while evoking the rebellious spirit of Pantera's roaring Texas years. Rex called it a gift for those who still believe metal has a soul. His influence goes far beyond album sales or awards. Rex Brown helped define what we now call groove metal, a sound both heavy and rhythmic, where the bass isn't just a foundation but the spine of the song. He has inspired generations of young bassists who learn from him not just technique, but philosophy. Play for the song, not for your ego. Rex Brown's legacy isn't just found in platinum albums, sold-out tours, or instruments bearing his name. It lies in how he remained human and honest in a chaotic world of metal, how he kept the heartbeat steady when everything else fell apart. For over 5 decades, he's never been the loudest person in the room, but always the one who made the music stand tall. From the early days with Pantera through Down, Kill Devil Hill, and his solo years, Rex has never strayed from his core belief. Music isn't for showing off, it's for surviving. He turned the bass into his own language, deep, precise, and soulful. Every pluck of his string carries weight, as if holding a lifetime of pain and experience. For longtime fans, Rex's bass isn't just Pantera's rhythm, it's the silent heartbeat of metal itself, the sound that has kept the genre alive for generations. More than technical influence, Rex Brown leaves behind a spiritual legacy, humility, discipline, and unwavering loyalty. In an industry where egos often drown out art, he stands as proof that sometimes the quiet ones carry everything. Young musicians, from Gen Z bassists to underground European bands, often name him as a symbol of truth in music. No pretense, no deception, just heartbeat and conviction. Rex Brown's journey is like a long piece of music, beginning with loss, passing through suffering, and ending in profound stillness. He doesn't need trophies or speeches. His legacy lives on in the way audiences still nod their heads to "walk," in the bass lines that still shake the stage whenever Pantera is remembered, and in the hearts of those who have found themselves through his music. Even today, though he rarely appears in the media, the industry still calls him by a special title: the silent soul of Pantera. Because in a world of metal filled with noise and competition, Rex Brown is living proof that true power doesn't lie in how loud you scream, but in the steadiness of a heartbeat that never falters. A man who never needed to be celebrated, only to play the right notes of his life. And that Rex Brown has done for over half a century, never missing a beat. And perhaps that is his greatest victory: to become part of history without ever fighting for it. To be remembered not for the noise, but for the truth. And you, when you listen to Pantera again, can you still feel that steady, thunderous pulse that has kept metal alive for half a century? If the answer is yes, then that's the mark of Rex Brown, a man who never asked to be called a legend, yet whose music has already become immortal. Share your thoughts about Rex Brown in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to Discovery Rewind. where we continue to tell the stories of souls who have lived, fallen, and still echo through the darkness of time.